From the Opubco Studios in Oklahoma City, you're watching The Press Row. I'm Jenny Carlson here with Barry Trammell. It's time for our weekly inbox segment where we take your questions and try to answer them. If you send us your questions via email, who knows, we might use your questions next week. Let's go right to the inbox. This one comes from Bill. Bill says, I have held season tickets for OSU basketball off and on since I graduated, and I've certainly got the feeling that there doesn't seem to be enough support within the university and the fan base to go around for both football and basketball. Do you think a successful season and strong run into the NCAA tournament will restore the enthusiasm for OSU basketball? I miss the good old days in Gallagher-Iba. Barry, I have to admit, the crowd for Bedlam this week, not very good. It was really sad.
No, and you know what? I'm with you, Bill. I miss the good old days in Gallagher-Iba. And if that means going back to the 90s when we had 6,300 fans in there, or even in the early 2000s when we had 13,000 and it was full for the big games and some of the little games too. So I miss those games. But OSU's swimming upstream on this deal because Oklahoma State has discovered what Oklahoma has long known, and Texas, and Florida, and Michigan, and Ohio State. It's hard to get massive intensity from the fan base for both sports.
That's exactly
you don't
right.
find very many big-time programs that go gaga over both sports. I don't know if OSU can do it, even with Travis Ford getting back to the NCAA tournament, even with a deep run in the tournament.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would return the frenzy to Gallagher-Iba.
Yeah, I knew it was bad, and you see the numbers and you go to the games and you realize it, but the Bedlam game started at 6, and that was definitely a fly in the ointment, and I wonder what the Big 12 is going to do long term about that, because crowds to a lot of these schools have to arrive from a distance. When you're talking about OSU, you're talking about coming from Oklahoma City, a lot of folks, coming from Tulsa, some folks. To get there at 6, you got to leave work by 4, and most people don't get off that early. So the crowd was so sparse early, filled in decently, but you don't have those chill bumps, those goosebumps when the crowd goes crazy, when Larry Reese starts the introductions, Barry. That is non-existent. And, it is asking a lot of fans to donate and buy tickets for football, to go to the games, to invest the energy, the money, and then to do it again for basketball. And, maybe it'll happen if they do make a deep run, but it is tough. You don't see it happen in a lot of places. And if it happens, you tend to have a much closer, bigger fan base. All right, back to the inbox. This one comes from Tyler. Tyler says, I think LSU showed that its defense, while few, does have flaws. Those flaws that Alabama exploited in the national championship game would have been destroyed by OSU's offense. The Honey Badger would have been torched by Blackman, and it would have been similar to the Fiesta Bowl score. Barry, what do you make of that?
I make of that no chance. I love OSU's offense. But the truth is, LSU has a big-time defense, and LSU was not going to wilt under the Oklahoma State attack. Now the Cowboys would have scored. Blackman would have had a good game. He might have had a big game. Mm-hmm. But the Cowboys weren't going to score 41 points or 38 points in regulation on LSU. No. Now I can see him getting into the 20s. I can see him getting 21, 24, maybe 28. I can see him winning the game. But no way would they have torched this LSU defense.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, until Alabama scored that late touchdown, LSU had turned them away even from close range. Don't forget that. And that's a pretty good Alabama offense. Granted, a young quarterback, but Trent Richardson, a great running back, a kid that he really took it to the SEC, a lot of teams this year. And so for that offense to be held to field goals to that point when it was really out of hand at that point, the LSU defense, I mean, you have to think they just sort of, in their minds, they knew this thing was over. But I do think it would have been interesting to see a more up-tempo, high-powered, passing game offense. But, Barry, we said that from the beginning. Wouldn't it be great to see a quarterback like a Brandon Whedon, a quarterback like an Andrew Luck against these defenses? We didn't. We never got that.
Somebody that could stretch the field.
Yep, we never did get that. All right, back to the inbox. This one comes from Bob. Bob says, I think the national championship game confirmed 2 things. Number 1, Nick Saban is the best coach in college football. Number 2, New Orleans is not the home field advantage for LSU many would want to believe. What are your thoughts about that, Barry?
Number 1, I agree. I mean, I don't see how anybody could argue that anything except Nick Saban is the king of college football and the best coach going today. Number 2, I don't buy it. I think New Orleans is a huge advantage for LSU. I think Alabama was uniquely qualified to handle that kind of pressure and that kind of environment for 2 or 3 reasons. 1, they've been to the Sugar Bowl zillion times.
Yep.
New Orleans is their second home.
Yeah.
Number two, they've been dealing with LSU and its crazy fans for a century. They just sort of know what they're getting into. And number three, Tuscaloosa is not that far from New Orleans.
Had a great fan base.
Do their own invasion,
Yeah.
sort of counter some of that. And I think LSU still had a home field advantage. And a lot of that's during the week. A lot of that's Sugar Bowl officials. A lot of that's people in New Orleans.
Yeah.
But once you get to the game, the Alabama invasion was able to counter some of that, driving in from Tuscaloosa.
Definitely so. And kudos to the Alabama fans for bringing it, for not allowing LSU to just take over that game environment. I think that did help Alabama. But you know what? Going back to Nick Saban, I listened to this game on radio because I was covering the men's Bedlam game, so I was driving back. And, they talked about some of the details that Nick Saban enacted between the end of the regular season and that national championship game. Things like weighing food and measuring out caloric intake to, the very last calorie, which seems crazy to me, but it worked, Barry. I mean, he had his team ready to play. They systematically broke down LSU and won that game. And were clearly the better team. We're better coached. I mean, kudos to him for what he did. Maybe over the top, maybe a little bit crazy, but hey, he's got a national championship. Back to the inbox for our last question. This one comes from Russ. Russ says, since Thabo Sefolosha is shooting his threes so much better, it would be interesting to compare his progress with what Bruce Bowen had for the Spurs a few years ago. This is an interesting comparison, Barry.
Yeah, and you know what? It's something that we've been talking about Thabo. If Thabo could get that corner three down, he would be a great replica of Bruce Bowen, who was a fabulous defender and then became a valuable offensive hand, not for doing much more than just passing the ball and then standing in the corner and receiving a pass for an open three. So if Thabo keeps playing like that, he's going into the New Orleans game. He's shooting 62% this season from three-point range.
Wow.
So he's a pretty good hand to have. I love Thabo Sefolosha. He's the reason why I want to own a sandwich shop. I want to have a Sefolosha sandwich. So I love Thabo Sefolosha. If he's shooting 62%, he becomes a big-time player.
What's on that sandwich, by the way?
I don't know. It's got whatever.
It's just the name.
Swiss cheese, I promise you that.
Well, you know what? I think part of what we're seeing with Thabo Sefolosha and his improved offense is a product of the lockout. Now, there are some products of the lockout that aren't good, but Thabo spent some time playing overseas and was his team's leader offensively. His team needed him to score, and he stepped up and filled that role. And I think that is a big reason we're seeing him able to take more of that role. He's able to do it. He felt comfortable doing it before. He's just transitioning it over. He's not a guy who needs the ball, but he definitely can handle it when he does get it.
Love me some Thabo.
Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoma.